we talked about your classical education and the way it's informed your work. Um, and we've seen some of your work influenced directly by music. Um, you had a very solid musical education, and you continue to play instruments and sing. And your brother, you've told me, is a master musician. Um, again, this has been seminal, hasn't it, to your work?
Yes, but I haven't really addressed it. I didn't really address it until 2014 with learning to make an oud in Nazareth, when I was working with the quartet, and I did the crucifixion poems for the Haydn string quartet, Seven Last Words, and I'm the title poem of that is I could read that. That would be a good one.
Yes, if you would.
Hmm. I'll have to go upstairs to get that. Sorry, I didn't bring that one down.
Don't worry. My copy of Making an Oud has not arrived on time.
Well,
I did order it, so you'll have to guide me through those readings.
Just 1 second. Okay, so the title poem of Learning to Make an Oud in Nazareth is, you can see it as a creation myth because it's structured in the sort of days of creation, or I got it from an Arab. I saw an Arab treatise about how to make an oud, and they used so many different sorts of wood, and I was very intrigued by that. So I threaded that through with some lines from the Song of Solomon. So it's yeah, I think that's all really. Learning to make an oud in Nazareth. The first day he cut rosewood for the back, bent sycamore into ribs, and made a belly of mahogany. Let us go early to the vineyards and see if the vines have budded. The sky was blue over the Jezreel Valley, and the gilt dove shone above the Church of the Annunciation. The second day, he carved a camel bone base for the fingerboard. I sat down under his shadow with delight. The third day, he made a knot of sandalwood and a pickguard of black cherry. He damascened a rose of horn with arabesques as lustrous as underleaves of olive beside the sea. I have found him whom my soul loves. He inlaid the sound hole with ivory swans, each pair a valentine of entangled necks, and fitted tuning pegs of apricot to give a good smell when rubbed. The fourth was a day for cutting high strings of camel gut. His left hand shall be under my head. For the lower course, he twisted copper, pale as tarmac under frost. He shall lie all night between my breasts. The fifth day, he laid down varnish. Our couch is green, and the beams of our house are cedar and pine. Behind the neck, he put a sign to keep off the evil eye. My beloved is a cluster of camphire in the vineyards of En-Gedi, and I watched him whittle an eagle feather, a plectrum, to celebrate the angel of improvisation who dwells in clefts on the Nazareth ridge, where love waits and grows if you give it time. Set me as a seal upon your heart. On the sixth day, the soldiers came for his genetic code. We have no record of what happened. I was queuing at the checkpoint to Galilee. I sought him and found him not. He'd have been in his open air workshop. I called, but he gave me no answer. The self-same spot where Jesus stood when he came from Capernaum to teach in synagogue, and townsfolk tried to throw him from the rocks. Until the day break and shadows flee away, I will get me to the mountain of myrrh. The seventh day, we set his wounded hands around the splinters. Come with me from Lebanon, my spouse. Look from the top of Shenir and Hermon from the lion's dens. On the 8th, there were no more days. I took a class in carpentry and put away the bridal rug. We started over with a child's oud bought on eBay. He was a virtuoso of the oud, and his banner over me was love. So in the book, I balanced that with a quite long poem, which on something I saw when I went to Yad Vashem, which was a completely extraordinary object. In fact, there's a photograph of it at the back of this book, which Yad Vashem kindly gave me the permission to copy. I don't know if you can see it, but
Yes.
it's a broom handle. Maybe you've seen it. It's a broom handle, and out of it is been made a chain carved by somebody. It's in the art part of the Yad Vashem Museum, and it was made in a French-run Nazi camp by somebody called Moshe Scheiner, a Polish Jew living in France, and he was.
Do you know which camp, Ruth?
No, he was arrested in 1941 and gave the chain to his wife. And in 1942, he was deported to Auschwitz, where he died. And his brother, Armand Scheiner, donated it to the collection.
Because my dad was in Gurs, and they deported to Auschwitz.
Right.
And the camps were run actually by, as you say, by the French, by the gendarmes. But they weren't Nazi. They were under General Darquier. But of course, they were carrying out the final solution. Yeah.
Well, he was actually visited by his non-Jewish wife. And I think he must have given the chain to her. And the chain is extraordinary because it's little scenes of what he saw in the camp. So you see the sheds where they live, and you see somebody with a wheelbarrow pushing a wheelbarrow and a guard behind, and so on. And then finally you see a farewell of the trains going off, and the head of it is kind of like a sort of a head of a like you used to have on coffee spoons or something, the head of a saint or the head of a patriarch.
Yes.
It's an amazing thing that somebody could have seen a broom handle and done it with a penknife over all that time.
It's like an apostle spoon. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yes. Yeah. So I did this. It's a long poem, and perhaps we don't need to, because it's not about music directly, but it's also about how you. What's it called?
It's about making, isn't it? And
yes.
It's about a making.
Expressing your experience.
And making in wood, and a horrible end, really. So yes, please, just can you read some of it? You talked about it being some sort of balance.
Yeah, because the book is very much about the three religions in the so-called Middle East, and about how they all come. There's all sort of they're sisters. They're sister religions, and there's Abraham is in there, and so on, and also about music and about harmony, and about how each of them. So there's another poem in there called "Facing East," where I think of Arab music, the harp of David, different sorts of music. The chain. Why do I keep thinking about that chain? I didn't dream it up. I wasn't born when Moshe Scheiner made it. But yes, if I'd had the skill torn out of my life, I guess if I found a broom handle broken from its head, I'd recognize something I could turn with a knife to linked medallions. I'd start picturing a cartouche, 4 or 5, between a run of loops. When does chain connect? And when does it spell prison, manacle, a cry for help, regalia of office? I'd be, at least, a witness, casting chains for the ships of Solomon. On the first lunette, where the handles snapped from the worn-out bristles, I'd show us saying goodbye, though that was not the word they used. They spoke French or maybe Polish, and the baby didn't speak at all. I'd carve myself, a father with his son. He's hugging my knees while I dandle the little one. That's where I begin, scraping where sap once rose in a pinewood heart, aiming not for the under image of Italio, but for raised relief, an upper layer, an outline to tell the world what happened here. A sequence of as it were, wood gems in umber, engraved and polished like cameos in carnelian, wreaths of chain to ornament the temple. For the links, I'd try out diagrams in the dust, sketching, half remembering different kinds of tensile loop, jump ring, pig holder, Taurus, daisy, curb, till I hit on a design like a safety pin without the springing free. Copying what swivels do with studs to prevent tangle, I'd mimic the effect of a metal worker pulling wire through smaller and smaller dies, then winding it round a mandrel. I'd imagine him, my ghost glass alter ego, keeping pace with me through the night in the tiny brilliance of one candle, cutting, bending, each link closed, then dripping in the solder. Why stand far off, O Lord? Why hide thyself in times of trouble? On the next cartouche, I'd carve myself walking away from the perimeter fence at Beaune-la-Rolande. It's only half built, but I know the Madsen guns are lining up behind. I am alone, lugging timber into that damnable hut as to a tomb. To represent, to withdraw in your mind, is not escape. You can't say I've sidestepped reality. On the third, I'm pushing a loaded barrow with an armed guard to supervise. For the fourth, no people, only the low-roofed bunkers black inside. On the last, wives and children wave goodbye to men boarding a train. One day, that will be me. Shall thy wonders be known in the dark? I'd keep the penknife hidden. Brushing ice from the inner window pane on winter nights, I'd carve the end into the bearded head of a patriarchal rabbi. Each of his hairs takes weeks. Like prayers at Rosh Hashanah, I'm trying to transform sin into grace. A snail can't crawl on the straight razor and live. You'd laugh to see the stages, how odd it looked half done. A chain sliding out of a stick, a grey pole alchemizing halfway down to honey rings like dunged straw into gold. And the new work sweet as a book you treasure but haven't yet cut the pages. I cry in the day, but thou hearest not, and in the night season. I'd work along the spindle, never knowing if the links are really there. I'm lost in the river. Strong bulls of Bashan have encircled me, gouging a negative, searching for air within one wooden oval to begin the next inside, so they'll shift against each other, sets me free. But outside or in, still the old question, is this discovery or true making? Are the forms of shaping mine? I will wake the dawn, I will toss my sandal on Edom. Blur your eyes, and it's the paper chain my children made to decorate the hearth. Will you be angry forever?
Thank you.
So that it's Beaune-la-Rolande was the camp.
Ah, right. Yes, yes. So my dad was at Gorse. So I'll just quickly pass through the tigers in red weather, where the serpent lives, and we know we've got an elephant book to look forward to. I wish we could talk more about the prose. My favorite is Silent Letters of the Alphabet. It's my Aleph, my number one. As I say, we met over 52 ways at looking at a poem, and then also the poem in the journey, the 60 poems looked at there. We'll put those to one side because we simply can't do them justice. I wanted to mention briefly, I'm reading One Art by Elizabeth Bishop. Well, it's her letters to Karen, and I bet you've got loads of fab letters that one day you'll show us. I don't know, are you a letter writer?
No, not now. I mean, after all, she was writing before email.
Yeah, well, emails as letters. Are you an email writer?
I don't sort of keep them. I know Valerie Grove, a friend of mine, she prints off her emails every now and then. No, I haven't kept. I've got a few emails. I've got some boxes of letters before yeah, up to about sort of 1990, I suppose.
But they're in the server, Ruth. So if you're ever having a tiny gap between books, you can just share. Anyway, two editions of, first the Mara Crossing, published in 2012 with a fab dust cover. Here it is.
Yeah.
And then it's been republished in a very timely form. We're all from somewhere else.
And yes, I've updated that a lot. I've put a lot more in about what's happening to refugees now. And I added one poem, which is called Dark Water, Burning World, which is part of a collaboration I did with a Syrian artist when I went to Lesbos. And so there's quite a lot about Lesbos. And actually that version, that edition is dedicated to, unfortunately, I think people who are now no longer who've been disbanded. They were a wonderful camp in Lesbos that was really, really helping children and other people. Yeah. And now the Greek government has disbanded it.
So the center of gravity of migration has sort of shifted from biology. It's still there, the biology, but we're looking at these huge migrations.
I wanted to put human migration in a larger context. That's basically it. And animals.
Can you talk about that? About human migration in the context that you've done here? Yeah.
I wanted to put human migration in a larger context of the world, because why do any species migrate? And they do it for basically there's either a push factor or a pull factor. So the world spins and tilts. So when it gets cold, these animals and birds that have reared their young in say in the Arctic, when it's warm, but there's lots and lots of food. The sea is buzzing with all sorts of plankton, and the air is buzzing with all sorts of insects, so that the birds and the fish and whales can feed their young. But then it gets too cold and they can't exist there anymore. The food is gone and it's too cold for them. So then they migrate. That's the basis of winter migration to a summer climb. And so there's both a push and a pull factor, in a way, that it gets too impossible to live there and there is no food, and there's a pull of more food and warmer climes somewhere else.
And then you pick out those subtle nuances, such as the robin, who will be the exception sometimes, and sometimes there are robins that travel. That's charming. How you always maintain those nuances. But yeah, sorry, forgive me for interrupting you.
So that's the basis of animal migration, and bird migration is the great sort of, it weaves the planet together. It is constantly happening. So on the night before 9/11, for instance, thousands of finches, because it happened in September, would have passed overhead exactly where those planes were coming next day. They're always, they're monitored. The Americans are very good at monitoring bird migration. Then there are, and so I wanted to use the animals and birds to show, first of all, to show that that's the context in which human migration happens. And secondly, to show how dangerous the journey is. So I didn't have to do the dangers of the journey with people, because it's already been done by the animals. So the Mara crossing, the Mara River is a river in Africa, across which the largest land migrations on the planet happen, which is of thousands of wildebeest and zebra and antelopes, which cross from the breeding grounds in the Serengeti over the river and then back again. And the danger of it is, first of all, they get exhausted by 3 months travel, and the little ones can't always make it, and they get picked off by predators. And then when they're actually crossing the river, it's full of large hungry crocodiles, and thousands of tourists go and watch them get eaten. It's horrible. And then they go all the way back. Why do they go back? Why, when there's lovely lush grass, then they stay? Because the breeding grounds in the Serengeti are on the soil which has phosphorus in it, and they need phosphorus to breed. so that they just go. And so it's rather equivalent to us going for mining from places where we can get things we can't get elsewhere. So once I've done the animals, and then as you say, there are in between animals which are partial migrants. So it's dangerous to go, but it can be dangerous to stay. So in my garden, when it's snowy, a little robin, might freeze to death. On the other hand, if it flies off to Spain, it might get picked off by a French farmer for food, or it might get eaten by a hawk, or any one of a number of things. Migrating birds, it's always a lottery. And I compare that to, you choose whether to go or to stay, and it's a choice, a life or death choice. And I compare that to the woman. We lived under her flat for a while when my daughter was little. She was called Mrs. Friedlander, and she was Viennese and Jewish, and she was 16, and she said to her parents, "We must go," and they said, "No, it'll be fine." And she was on the last of the Kindertransport, and her family all died. And she got to India, and so she spent the war in India and became a nurse. But it's rather similar in a way with robins, because the older ones, if you're an old robin, it's wiser to chance staying and facing the freezing cold rather than the journey. So you choose. It's self-selected if you're up to the journey or not.
Can we look at the new poem?
Yeah, it was Isam's. My friend Isam Kurbaj, the Syrian artist whom I'd worked with in Cambridge, when I was in Lesbos. I've lived in Greece a lot, and I went for the summer. I was invited to a conference on another island on Spetses, and I thought, this was 2016. I had to go to Lesbos to see what was happening. 243, page 243, Dark Water, Burning World. And the Syrians I met there looked so like Isam. I just rang him up and said, we must do something to at least to celebrate the courage of the Syrians coming here, and also the hospitality of the Lesbos Islanders and welcoming them, taking them from the waves. Unfortunately, of course, 5 years later, that's very different now. And it's that poor island is a kind of test case for how the whole world's dilemma about migration, that there isn't enough, there's feelings of the people of the host country that there's not enough food, there's not enough land, they may affect us, they'll change our lives.
If we don't, the cost to us as human beings is something which
yes,
is so rarely addressed in the way that I think you're addressing in this book.
Yeah, and I think the prose parts of these books, these little essaylets, are important. I mean, I could read some other aspects of that, but this is quite a long poem. I mean, it's some sort of takes some time.
Well, we're at 2:00. My time is yours. Yeah. If you're happy to do it, I'm happy for you to do it. But I know you have a lot of commitment.
I have a lot of other commitments. We'll keep going for a bit. But maybe I'd like to.
Maybe what we do is refer people to it. You choose something that you'd like to read, because I think then there may be other things you want to say about this book before we wrap up.
Yes.
Okay, so just honoring my side of it, I invite you to proceed accordingly. So what would you like to go within Dark Water, Burning World, which starts on page 243?
Yes, I will. But I would just like to look at the place where I'm talking about
the essay. Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the hospitality to strangers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Demos, if you go to page 154,
Yes, exactly. 152 onwards.
yes, that's right.
Without a home, everything is fragments. In the 20th century, the chaff produced by war and violent economic change blew through the inhabited continents in stories of migration, even more varied and dangerous than those of animals and birds. But migration also creates songs. Music unifies. Orpheus drew together rocks, trees, animals, and people. Songs connect the disconnected. Italian migrant workers remembering the railway stations where they parted from their families, sailors singing shanties, slaves singing spirituals in the Delta, the Irish and Scots in America. All these songs reach back to a lost home, united singer and listeners with a place and people left behind.
Mm.
In the earliest recorded Greek, xenos meant stranger, but also guest friend. This was a pivotal relationship in an ancient culture which knew that when you were traveling, you needed protection. A network of reciprocal guest friendships spread across the archaic Greek world. When you come, I will look after you. Make yourself home in my home. Homeric hosts give their guests rich presents on departure. The rules of generosity, hospitality, and its obligations were often abused, of course, but they were the rules. Xenos was the basis of the system underlying social relations. Helping strangers was an obligation in ancient Judaism too. If you look up the word foreigner in the Bible, you find many exhortations to help the stranger. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and are unable to support themselves, orders Leviticus, help them as you would help a foreigner and a stranger. I was a father to the needy. I took up the case of the stranger, says Job. No stranger had to spend the night in the street. My door was always open to the traveler. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, Paul reminds the Hebrews. Despite the pogroms and anti-Semitism that were to scar Europe later, built into her most ancient language and also her most ancient faith is the obligation of generosity between host and guest, resident and migrant. And so that's the sort of I think that's underlying the lesbian islanders in their first instinct, which was to help the people they pulled out of the waves. And I talked to a woman, a newspaper editor in Mytilene, the capital of the island, and she'd gone down herself to the shore and waited for these migrant boats and helped to wrap them in these silver blankets. But she said, her grandmother came from Izmir, from Smyrna, when Smyrna was burning in 1922. And, she said the stories these people told from Syria were exactly the same as the stories my grandmother had told.
And if you, I'm sure you, well, in Whom Gods Destroy, you talked about the aspect of madness which was related to wandering.
Yes.
And it comes alive as you look at Dark Water, Burning World, as you read that extract you've just read for us. So I think perhaps coming down to earth at the end of this wonderful couple of hours we've had together, which I have to edit into various segments, I wonder if you would read from Dark Water, Burning World, and then say goodbye to us.
I'd love to. Yeah. Dark Water, Burning World. The waves talk to their gods. The waves have their prey. The dead bump sideways in gullies gouged from grey fire. An arm, a trailing bloom sodden in the surf. Where does the wave end and water around it begin? How do you separate self from the other, edge from the flesh? Shadows of ourselves, no more than a shiver on water, then another life and another, like the waves, and the dead face down, slamming the shore. 2. Last night we waited again, listened to the dark by bales of silver survival blankets donated by foreign charities, listened to night wind, the sighing of pine tree and tamarisk, slap, slap of water on rock, slap, slap of our hearts. This is where they come, and their stories, our stories. My grandmother, small girl, escaping the furnace of Smyrna. This is how it begins, claiming a new place on earth through waves like rings of a tree, rings of the centuries, lone furrows over this sea that has known so many battles, so many deaths, to the foam and stone of our island's edge. 3. And the families broken. The boy who went ahead to Europe, lost. The father, a forgotten hand whose fingers feel for the dark. Find the lowest star on the horizon, she said to her firstborn, 15 last year. He set out alone. Fix your eyes on that all night and you'll be safe. Her bird soul batters its way to Germany, impossible to penetrate as the emeralds of paradise. 4. Moon after moon has gone by, waiting, forking out more and more money for smugglers, for their excuses, the right time, the right wind, surveillance, no moon. Wait a while longer. All for this terror, rocking and spilling on the water alone. Those facing backwards see smudges of rose like fire on the black lace sky. That was our home. Not in our time, Lord. Yes, in our time. And the heart tap-tapping its prison of bone. The wave rolls over. We feel it thrash through the thin rubber skin of the dinghy. How it hates us and our life jackets bought at blood price. Will this be the wave, this mirror maze of lidded muscle, fluted like the moon, a roaring of smithereen silver, slate-finned like a shark, hour by hour denser and colder, sliding away to the spire and spine of a breaker, to fling us up, spill us down, in full view of a long gazed at shore, where there was nothing all night, where there was nothing, just grey mist. Here is a shape abandoned by Charon, steering through the small starlight of cell phones, bursting on rocks, grit chipping, lancing the skin, pull them out of the sticks, find the rhythm wet to the bone. They hug one another and shiver and they cry. Sharp pebbles, whispering trees, our language strange, no doubt, and our hands rough, slippery, pulling them out from a last tug of waves to a sleepy burble of doves. Wet faces in dawn's crumpled blaze, lit for each other, as if water kept its shape after the jug has broken, one shining, petrified moment before the shattered pieces fall away.
Lesbos 2016. Ruth Padel, this is Monday, the 8th of March, 2021. And I just want to thank you very much for my own part and for the part of all the people who will see this in time, I hope. And I wish you Godspeed with all your projects.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and you show a remarkable grasp of all the stuff that I've done and how to knit it together. It's very interesting, and thank you for the opportunity to do it and for inviting me.
It's been a huge privilege. Thank you.